Rectangular tables, they're everywhere, but they're really not that exciting. Until you realise there's a fairly straightforward way to turn most of them into fully functioning snooker tables. And this is how. Welcome back. If it was your first time watching one of our videos, then it's fantastic to have you here. Especially at the moment, snooker tables are inaccessible to far too many people. But the good news is, I may have come up with a solution.
I really don't understand how something this poorly constructed can work this well.
But why do I need this table? Because as regular viewers to this channel will know, I'm lucky enough to be able to get to a full-size snooker table without even having to leave my own property.
But unfortunately, people like Jamie in Kilkenny Island have nowhere to play snooker right now as their clubs have been shut down.
And since the pandemic hit, that's the story I've heard far too often. People have got loads of time on their hands, but there's no way they can get near a table. Which left me thinking there must be something I can do. Which takes us back to 2 days ago, when I finally got the idea when I was in the shower. I started thinking like this. Basically, any table with a tablecloth on it is basically a snooker table, except the balls fall off the sides. So what if I got 2 planks of wood, the exact length of the table, and nailed them together, and did the same thing on the other side? Then if I put 4 more pieces at the ends to stop the wood from moving, and 12 more pieces on top, it would stay in place. That is, if I held it all together with bungee cords. This then clamps over and above the table, but to stop it falling apart, I've got these little tiny screws that bungee cords just about fit round, so I can clamp the whole thing together, and this stops it falling off the table without the need to physically attach it. This assembly not only holds itself on the table and the cloth in place, but also does something far more vital. It creates gaps in exactly the right place that pockets need to go, making the blocks of wood themselves the jaws of the pockets, and the bungee cords that hold everything in place fully function as cushions.
So I think I've done fairly well with this. All I've done is thrown a cloth onto a table and put these 2 wooden side bits on that are held together with bungee cords. And as you can see, I've got the gaps for the pockets. Now at the moment it's not ideal because the cue ball goes underneath. But if I do what I've done at this end and clamp it down, which I'm going to do all the way around the table in a way in a minute, then it's looking pretty good because I can pop a ball in the middle. Okay, not ideal because it drops on the floor, or I can try and play the double in here, which isn't easy. It's definitely on. Look at this, look at this. Yes! Oh, I don't know if that's in or not yet.
To cover the cushions and make the pockets, I had to take this whole thing off again, which thankfully wasn't really that difficult. The bad news was, however, while I was doing this, I discovered a problem, something I'd overlooked.
The centre of this table is pretty much perfectly level, which is fantastic and exactly what we need in both directions. The problem is you start coming out here and it's all over the place. It slopes away to both sides and that really isn't going to help us. But I've got a plan. Paper.
So I began fanning out bits of paper to make the table as level as I possibly could, and this took far longer than creating the cushions. I completely overlooked the possibility that the top of this table is actually dome-shaped, and it really cost me serious time. So if this is something you're going to attempt, just make sure the top of the table is at least fairly level. To finish off the cushions, I just wrapped some spare cloth around the wood and the bungee cords to keep the cue ball on the table. The pockets, however, were a lot harder, and it took me quite a while to think of something that would actually slow the ball down safely, and that's when I found an old mountain bike tyre. But this would never stop the balls from falling on the floor, so to solve this problem, I stapled to the tyres some doubled over bread bags, and I ended up with this.
So that took longer than I wanted to. In fact, it's now the next day, but I've managed to create this. Haha! Okay, so all I've really done is put cloth around the cushion so when the cue ball hits it, it actually bounces off. I've held that down using blocks of wood like this. Didn't quite have enough wood to cover the table. And then the only other thing I've done is put old bits of tyre or old bits of bike tyre around the back of the pocket and put bread bags underneath them, because it seems to be the best thing to actually hold the ball. I don't think I can get more than one ball in there at a time, otherwise I'm going to have a problem, but other than that, it's all good.
I needed to mark up the table, but because I'm using full-size balls, I decided to set them up first to see how they'd look, and 15 seemed a little bit ridiculous.
So I just need to mark the table. Important to have the right tools. So I've got a dinner plate and a set square. So yeah, that should do it. I'm just going to go about there, I think.
After I got everything set up, I decided it would probably be best to play games of snooker on this table with just 6 reds.
Oh yes. Okay.
Obviously I wasn't expecting too much from what was just a couple of days ago my dining room table and an old piece of cloth that I found in my airing cupboard. But surprisingly, everything seemed to work.
Oh! This is awesome!
It definitely felt different, but it still felt like a snooker table.
Oh, look at that! Stun this in. Play for the blue. Could be a little bit tricky. A bit worried about it, but anyway. Sure, screw back with the brown. Oh, this is so good. I reckon it's good enough that I can comfortably have a 50 break on it.
When the balls left the table, they were supposed to automatically roll downhill into the pocket, and I think this not happening is pretty much the only thing I got wrong. Even though this wasn't ideal, it was still fairly obvious when you were playing what balls had left the table and which ones hadn't. Even though the table was difficult to play on, the fact that I'd made the pockets absolutely huge made it really fun. So much so I was still playing on it several hours after I finished filming this, and that's why I was almost late uploading the video. You can even screw the ball back quite easily, and I don't think it's even the least reactive table I've played on.
I'm in exactly where I should be to clear the covers.
Even though it rolled around all over the place and it didn't always react off the cushions in the way it should do, you could play several shots in a row where it really felt like you were playing on an actual snooker table.
I know I have no way of proving this, but that was actually the first attempt at that.
That video made me way too overconfident, so I tried to make a headcam video where I made 100 break, and I did it eventually, but it actually took me quite a while. And unfortunately most of the video isn't any good because I'm just staring at the walls and the ceiling most of the time. There was even building work going on next door, and when I got on the brown the camera cut out because the memory card had run out of space. With the table, however, I was so impressed that you could screw the cue ball back on an old tablecloth, and you could spin the cue ball round cushions that were made out of bungee cords. I really didn't expect that to be possible.
Okay, so there's no way this is genuinely a snooker table, but for something that is just a cloth thrown on the table, some bits of wood strapped to the side with bungee cords, some tyres and some bread bags, that's literally all it is that I could have thrown together in a day. The only thing that took me a bit longer is, stupidly, I thought, this table's bound to be level, and it wasn't, so I had to try and level it out with a piece of paper. That took forever. That took like another day to do that. So as long as you get a actually flat table, I think this is unbelievable fun. It might not actually help you snooker, but if you can make something like this when you can't get near a snooker table, I genuinely give it a go, because you can play with regular size snooker balls. I mean, you need the regular size snooker balls, but it's still fantastic.
If you're looking for other things to do while in lockdown, why not have a look at our snooker quarantine trick shots, or see if you can defeat the COVID-19 snooker challenge. And remember, don't just watch, play, and make the commitment to becoming a better player by subscribing to the channel and visit the website. See you later.